How's it going, guys? Thanks so much for clicking on this video. This is a CDL Talent Roundtable discussion where all of us as talent got together, put our heads together, and basically talked on each and every single CDL roster heading into MW2. We chat on what was their journey last season, what they've currently constructed, and the way that this roster could look or this team could look moving into the MW2 year. So major thank you to all of the talent for joining in on this, for having these conversations, as well as to Bryce, who actually orchestrated all of this stuff to come together. Now the full-on VODs will have a full part 1 and a full part 2. Those links rather will be in the description of this video that you can feel free to check out to watch it more in long form. If you want to check out certain teams, certain snippets, I will have that here located on the channel. If you haven't seen your favorite teams upload yet, I promise it's coming. We talked about all 12 of them. So make sure to let us know, whether through different content pieces, if you want to tweet, comment, like, subscribe, any way that you guys can show us some support to let us know that you guys like content like this. We would love to hear it. We'd love to hear your guys' feedback, output on ways that we could even make it better. So without further ado, I'll leave you to it. Enjoy the video, and I'll see you back here on the channel really soon.
Okay. Hello and welcome to the Roundtable Part 2. Just 4 of us at the moment because rehearsals are going on for the CDL, but we thought we'd get this done before we went into the matches to give you a little bit of an idea of what to expect. 6 more teams to talk about, of course, joined here by Chance, Lando, and TUNN. And let's get straight into it then. Let's talk about a team I want to talk about, the Las Vegas Legion. We're going straight in with an interesting team, one of the least successful franchises in recent years. And that's a little bit of an understatement. Who wants to kind of kick me off on how they feel about last year's team?
Well,
Okay.
I mean, last year's wasn't great. Let's be honest, but I think we all kind of had a good inclination as to that was going to be the case. Look, we constantly questioned sort of I want to say the effort from Paris in terms of, you know, like putting a team out there that could go on to win an event, and they didn't do that last year. At any stage, really. They then kind of became a favorite for when they actually won a series, which I'm not too sure if it's a positive or not, because if anything, it was kind of just satirical in a kind of way. I'm not too sure if they would be too happy with what happened last year, but yeah, quite easily the worst team that we did have.
Yeah, it was underwhelming. Like the fact that we were celebrating the fact that they finally got their first victory. I forget who it was who had like a team interview with them on the stage. Like,
yeah, the major.
Yeah, it just felt like it was like, hooray! Like they did it. Like it was almost like a league-wide celebration of the recognition of like, yeah, it's Paris. It's more specifically the Legion. You know, little by little, they're the last ones, of course, to cross the finish line, and everyone's going to celebrate the fact that they did it. And well, I feel like it was a fun moment. I almost feel like it was slightly degrading for the players looking back at it, because it was like we all were kind of having a laugh at the same time of like recognizing the fact that, yeah, you guys are the last ones to get a W. Let's get everybody on the stage, talk to them, see how they feel. Like, I don't know. I agree with Tana. It was really not the way that you'd want your your third season technically, but your back-to-back seasons to go bottom of the barrel, no question about it. Yeah, just the definition of forgettable, I would say.
I don't know if I say forgettable. I think there are severe issues within that team. I even would go as far to say is that team is kind of reminds me like the old Seattle team way back when they kind of gave up. It felt like they could have been possibilities for that team to be better and compete, but they just were in such a bad position that nobody was able to put in the work. I think some of those players on there got a bad rap. I think players like Gravity and Jimbo in any other team would probably have much better stock, would probably have looked better as things went on.
Kind of going into a bad situation.
They've gone into a bad situation, and then people wondering why they're playing bad. So here's the thing. I know for a fact there were entire maps last year where certain players on that team didn't even talk. Just didn't even talk. Like, that's how bad it is. Like, you go into map 2, they don't talk to each other. Like, you're just playing for KD. Kind of ridiculous. Like, how do you expect the team to work in a league this competitive when you've got players basically throwing tantrums like children? It just doesn't work.
And well, I mean, a lot of people would obviously presume who that is, and then I mean, look, I know there would have been some frustration last year, not trying to allude to anybody in particular, but like Temp was very outspoken about his position in the team, and how he performed was kind of their highlight, of course. But then some people were asking, "Oh, is he just playing for himself? Is he just playing for a spot next year?" Like, yada 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 yada. Well, it works because I mean he's still in that roster, of course. But yeah, it just overall, I think there's very little to say about it other than it was poor. Didn't seem to be managed very well across the board. Paris were probably the worst organization, not just from a pure talent perspective, but how often we talk about like just no content, like no social posts. They kind of became a bit of a meme at that stage.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think yes, as Lando said, he had to absolutely forget.
I think so. Charles, anyone you want to weigh in on the Paris Legion, now the Vegas Legion?
For the old team, no. I mean, they were like 2-23 in the year, so there's no reason to care about them. You are correct in pointing out, obviously, that like there's a bunch of players that got put in a very bad situation, and like now we're in a point where they're just going to get overlooked. So I think that's the important takeaway of your players like Gravity, your players like Jimbo, who like had moments or like even have reputations in a sense from challengers where like they are solid players, but just put in quite literally the worst situation possible in an unwinnable move. So I think that's the only thing worth commenting on there. For the upcoming Legion team, though, I mean, I think generically there's going to be excitement around it because they're going to be so much better than they were last year, like almost by default. And then obviously guys like Clayster, 3-time world champion, one of the best players of all time, still staying in the mix. I mean, we're going to have a 30-year-old on the main stage, as soon as like the Raleigh event kicks off for the first time. So it's like a fun boundaries pushing thing. And I do think the team has like a decent bit of potential. Like I don't necessarily see them as like world beaters necessarily, but they could be quite good. And like, towards the top of the league and like, maybe make some sort of miracle run at one of these events. But at the very least, they're going to be a ton of fun to watch. They are going to have some of the best listen-ins in the league. And especially, I mean, again, just to highlight guys like Clayster, like, I know Celium has the reputation of being like the nerdiest, knows all the spots kind of player in the league, but Clayster's like the OG for that sort of thing. And even watching him when he was streaming scrims, I mean, this would have been a few weeks ago at this point, like he seems to know everything. All the jump spots, all the nerd spots, all the wall bang spots. And like, he's constantly like flushing these out. And even hearing the way he's like talking to his teammates and be like, hey, we have to be able to do all these things and like ingrain them in our gameplay. And if they can, up the ante, evolve their own gameplay, if you get guys like TJ and ProLuke to do all like the nerdy stuff nonstop as well, like I just think they're going to be a fun team to watch.
It's honestly like really crazy how the narrative has instantly changed around the Legion. Like past 3 years, we were all aware of it. Like, one of the bottom tier teams of the league. Then Cold War hit. It was like, okay, they are, in this situation. Things have started to come out about players not being happy, franchise, organization problems, etc. Even little things like the social media topic that TUNN was mentioning as well, which is incredibly accurate. And then now we're coming into this season. It's not about the rebrand, but it actually comes at a perfect time. I feel like now that we're calling them Las Vegas, it feels, I know I use this term a lot, but like a little bit of a page turning situation. And now they've got Clay. And now it's like Legion is fun to talk about for the first time. Like I have never been more excited. Like if I were to see Legion on the schedule in prior years, to be like, okay, like hopefully they at least put up a decent performance, get the series a little far. I mean, what like Chance said, like it was like a 2-25, 2-23 record, whatever it was. Now it feels like there was actually some life. And the one thing that I really like most about this Las Vegas Legion roster is exactly the same thing what Chance was talking about. Like it feels like there's motivation. It feels like there's life. They were, streaming their scrimmages, I think longer than anybody else. I wonder if there is an underlying element of like, if they are slightly overhyped because of that reason. I think everyone wants the Legion to do well. So I think there is a small element of that needs to be recognized, but there's no surprise. We all want this team to do well. I think the story with Clay, without a doubt, is going to be the biggest focal point on this team. Is, one of the greatest players of all time, oldest player in the league, 3-time world champion. Can he essentially lead Las Vegas Legion, the most unsuccessful CDL franchise without question, to the promised land? Like maybe to a final, maybe to a championship, who knows? But I think there's a lot of things that have to happen involving with that, but it feels exciting that we're actually talking about Legion, the team name itself, and in a positive light now.
Well, that's a lot of positivity. Here's some negativity. For this Legion team, it kind of feels like the last ride. Like, this is last chance Legion. That's how I'm looking at this team. Every single player on this roster, let's not forget, let's not kid ourselves that Legion was the place where people kind of like say that careers go to die, right? Like, you don't normally come out of Legion and do well after that. Like, I'm not even going to joke with you here. I think for every single player on this team, it is, you have to do well this year and you have to show us something. Like, people are talking about TJ, right? They want to see if TJ has a good year. If TJ has another bad year, does he stay in the league, right? That's the question. Clayster, obviously, you know, almost could have retired last year after coming off from New York. Could have happened.
Oh, yeah.
Right? He's coming back. He's going to have to show his veterancy of putting them in the place and getting them to a position where it's actually winnable, right?
And
that's what...
Go on. Sorry, I thought you were done. And just to further cement on that Clayster side of things, like, he had a terrible year last year. So a lot of people will sort of say, like, Clayster is a good pickup by the Legion. Yes, absolutely is. But I mean, how many potential places does Clayster have to go at the same time? But in that route, he is also then landing himself on a team that really does not look too bad. So it's kind of worked out in his favor that he might have that team who he kind of needs to boost himself back up again. There's a couple of different kind of stories of that last chance in a certain way. TJ's been underperforming for years. Clayster had a really bad last year and then has maybe just had this chance. Temp has kind of always been the promise, but has not quite been there. But and then on the other hand, you got somebody in Pro Loot last year who had his shot, looked pretty good, and Legion went, right, yeah, we'll give him a shot. So immediately I feel like this roster overall is looking better for Legion, but some of them have kind of fallen into that bracket of players that Legion would look for as well.
And I will say, go ahead, Bryce, go ahead.
So I want to finish my point about the last chances, because every single player I think in here is, the pressure is ridiculous. Getting dropped from this roster if they need to make a change is going to be painful for any of them. I'm looking at Temp. Temp's one of the only players that actually has gone like season to season with the Legion, right?
Yep.
And that's because he had a good KD last year and he looked pretty good. But I'm going to be honest with you. This, for me, is probably his biggest proving time. He now has the building blocks around him to form a good team that needs to make a run. He hasn't been able to show us that, you know, he can be part of that winning structure to go forward and be a serious, consistent force in the league, right? If he doesn't do it again, if he doesn't perform within that framework, then there's a serious issue, because he has shown raw talent. He has shown the ability to get kills on the map, but has he shown the ability to be in a team that can challenge for championships every single event? Like, and I think that's his biggest stumbling block, because if he can't do it with these players around him, then is he ever going to do it?
And this is also a team that I think too, I don't know if everybody else would agree on this. I feel like it's maybe more of a common point, but I think that if we are going to say, oh yeah, Las Vegas Legion, you know, they could be a, you know, above average, like maybe even around the 8, if not higher. I know in the coaching power rankings, they were listed at 5, which I was very surprised.
I've gone that high. I've
but I think
they are good.
I think we could all agree though, that like the start of the season is their time. Like, not just because of roster changes, not just because of all this stuff, but I feel like one of the biggest advantages that this team is going to have, at least off the start of the game, is how much can they play? How much can they grind? I feel like the fuel of the exact thing that we're talking about is that, hey, all these guys, last chance Legion, all of this stuff is intertwining in the fact that this first major has to be solid. It at least needs to be good. I know they have a tough schedule, given, you know, teams on paper, who really knows how everybody's going to perform. At least on paper, they have a tough schedule. But I do think that this opening major very well could make or break the culture, the love around this team. I mean, we know we've seen Clay get frustrated in the past. I mean, if we start to see come match time, players begin to struggle. Players aren't calming. Again, I think there's a lot of worries on the SMG line when it comes down to this team. Pro Loot and Tej, like, can they be consistent? Can they look good on a regular basis? If you're facing off against top teams in the league, if Clay and Temp are having an off series with the M4s, you know, can those guys on the Vaznevs or whatever, you know, pick up the pace a little bit? And so I think it kind of gets back to this overarching talking point of like, this is a team that we all recognize on paper is not filled with the most talent, obviously, but their biggest advantage is how much they can play earlier on in the game. How many things can they learn ahead of other teams? Have they grinded more than other rosters? That could be the way that they find more success. And so I feel like earlier on, it has to be a huge emphasis on going all out, playing as well as you can, taking every advantage that you have, because again, I feel like as the season progresses, it's only going to get more difficult for this team.
All right, let's talk about potential then. Let's talk about let's go to the future. How does this team perform here? By the way, I've been watching a few scrims from theirs, and I actually have them pretty high. By the way, TJ looks good from what I've seen at the moment. He looks very, very good on this game. So I think top 6. I think this team, that's where I'm going to baseline them. If they underperform that, it will be an underperform in my mind. It is a very competitive league, but I expect them to mix it up mid-table this year.
Yeah, in and around there for me. I think, you know, we talked about it in the previous half of the episode, is that the sense that there is a lot of these teams who could beat anyone on any given day at a certain stage, you would think. I would say there's 6 or 7 teams that are arguably potentially better than them, but it's difficult. I think they're kind of going to be on the cusp of that top 6. I would have them top 8 on my side of things, to be honest with you. But it's really easy to say that just based on scrims, which we obviously have seen quite a few of. I think they're looking good. I'm curious to see if they can keep up what seems to be good early season form. But yeah, I think consistently middle of the road is kind of where I'm going to see them at.
Yeah, I feel like major placement wise, like if we're talking about like major 1, like what is their ending result? I feel like this team should be happy with the top 6 finish. That's what I would say is that what they should be happy with. Obviously, anything above that, amazing. Anything below that, you're like, okay, you know. And as I said, the biggest emphasis on this major 1 is the fact that I feel like now is their time to shine, if there will be at any point throughout the season. But again, they do have a very difficult schedule. Like they go against in the qualifiers, Thieves, then they face off against the Mutineers, which again looks like they're, you know, a W that at least it should be theirs. Then they have FaZe, and then they have Rocker. And it's like, if you have Rocker high, these could be 3. I mean, FaZe and Thieves, I think, are regarded as like number 1, number 2, at least around S tier, if not high A tier. And then you have Minnesota Rocker, who are this unknown entity. Some of us really like them. Some of us just like them. But that's the worrisome part about this Vegas roster. If you slip up versus Florida, you very well could be 0-4 and in a much worse spot when it comes down to how things shape up at Major 1.
Chance, any last word on the Legion?
I just look at it more of like in terms of the entire league. Like there's going to be 2, maybe 3 teams that are like sitting towards the top. There's going to be 1, maybe 2 like stinker teams expecting towards the bottom. Everyone else to be middle of the pack. I think Legion will just be sort of in the middle of the pack with the potential to make a breakaway and have like a really strong event. Maybe see a grand finals. Like who knows how brackets could work out, but also the potential to, again, as Lando's pointing out, if they have a very tough schedule, they start off, you know, 1-3, 0-4, and they just get daggered in groups like straight away. Like they're just in that middle ground where I see the potential at the height. I see the potential for like a collapse to set in, and it's you know, it's Call of Duty.
What do we think is more likely though? Like really quick, I'm not trying to make us talk longer than we need to. What do we think is more likely that happens?
I think Clay wins champs.
I think for me, it's more of
there.
like a schedule thing of like who they actually get lined up against. But I lean more positive on the Legion than I do negative for sure.
I'm much more positive on the Legion this year.